Welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today. Over the next few minutes, we're going to unpack a century of immense geopolitical transformation, really tracing the journey of the Indian subcontinent from the early 1900s all the way to the complex present day. And understanding this journey is absolutely vital to understanding today's global economy and the broader geopolitical landscape. It's a fascinating story of shifting borders, global conflicts, and this relentless pursuit of stability.
So look at the question here. How did a fragmented British colony become a modern nuclear-armed powerhouse? It's a massive question, right? And the sheer scale of this historical journey is just mind-blowing. To actually answer it, we have to look at the lines drawn on maps, the global wars that forced change, and the intense internal struggles that forged new nations.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We'll navigate this history through 6 key chapters, starting under the British Empire, then the path to independence, partition and new borders, the Cold War and conflict era, internal strife and neighbors, and finally, the modern nuclear era. Let's go.
Chapter 1. Under the British Empire, the foundations of the 20th century. You know, back at the start of the 1900s, this vast patchwork region was basically a massive engine, extracting resources and wealth for the empire.
Then World War I breaks out, 1.5 million. Just let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering number of Indian soldiers drafted to fight on European fronts and all across the British Empire. You'd think that kind of immense loyalty and sacrifice would fundamentally change their standing, wouldn't you? Well, it didn't. When the war ended, Indians did not see their overall colonial conditions improving at all, and that massive disappointment, it acted like a powerful catalyst, severely intensifying protests against colonial rule.
That brings us to Chapter 2, The Path to Independence, focusing on resistance and World War II. Facing violent repression, figures like Mahatma Gandhi sparked mass civil disobedience for a secular India, while the Muslim League began envisioning their own completely separate state.
Now, what's really interesting about this next shift is how these two factions reacted when World War II erupted. Britain focused all its resources on fighting Nazi Germany, and over 2.5 million Indians would eventually fight globally. But politically, total divergence. The Congress Party demanded the immediate departure of the British and, well, faced prison for it. The Muslim League, on the other hand, strategically chose to cooperate to maintain favor. It's just a profound split in strategy.
And while all this global maneuvering was happening, absolute tragedy struck at home. 2 to 4 million. That is the horrific loss of life during the 1943 Bengal famine. The war exacerbated this disaster immensely. When Japan, allied with Germany, took over Burma, they cut off a crucial regional supply of rice, which was a major factor in these millions of deaths. So, under immense pressure from literally all fronts, Britain promised to discuss India's independence as soon as the war ended.
Chapter 3. Partition and new borders. A subcontinent divided. Fearing an all-out civil war between widening religious gaps, Britain decided the only solution was to just split the subcontinent entirely. The execution of this plan happened incredibly fast, in August of 1947. First, on August 14th, the Muslim country of Pakistan is born, uniquely divided into a western and an eastern part. Literally the very next day, the secular, Hindu-majority Indian Union is born. But the aftermath? It was tragic. Massive displacement and violence erupted along these brand new borders. Millions of people were forced to flee from one country to the other, displaced purely based on their religion.
And redrawing these maps instantly sparked conflict in Jammu and Kashmir. It was an incredibly complex situation. You had a Hindu Maharaja ruling a majority Muslim population. Initially, he didn't join either nation. But when Pakistani troops infiltrated, the Maharaja urgently traded integration with India for military help, and boom, that ignited the very first Indo-Pakistani War. It became such a massive diplomatic mess that after 2 years, the United Nations actually had to step in, negotiate a ceasefire, and draw a temporary border.
Which leads us right into Chapter 4, Cold War and Conflict, Global Tensions and Regional Wars. A newly independent, democratic India now had to navigate a deeply, deeply divided globe.
Their solution? The non-aligned movement. This was a strict policy of opting for neutrality during the Cold War, basically avoiding binding alliances with either the United States or the Soviet Union. And this actually brought India diplomatically closer to African and Asian countries. However, diplomacy is delicate, right? When the Indian Prime Minister eventually visited the USSR, signaling warmer ties, it significantly angered their powerful neighbor to the north, China. Tensions with China were already simmering, especially after the Dalai Lama fled to India. Plus, China outright refused to recognize the 1914 McMahon Line drawn by the British in eastern India. Well, in 1962, this boiled over. China attacked India, quickly capturing disputed territories, and then just declared a unilateral ceasefire, retaining control of Aksai Chin. And in a fascinating geopolitical twist, following this brief but impactful war, China began fostering much closer diplomatic ties with India's primary rival, Pakistan.
And this brilliantly illustrates the repeated cycle of regional conflicts India faced. Pakistan tried to capitalize on India's defeat to China. In 1965, Pakistani soldiers disguised as civilians infiltrated Kashmir, leading to the Second Indo-Pakistani War, which ended again in a UN ceasefire. But fast forward to 1971. Over in East Pakistan, a separatist party won an election, leading to a violent crackdown by the Pakistani army. Millions of refugees poured into India, so India intervened militarily, ultimately helping to create the brand new independent nation of Bangladesh, which significantly weakened Pakistan in the process.
Chapter 5. Internal Strife and Neighbors. Managing Fractures at Home.
But before we dive into domestic politics, we really have to look at this massive technological leap. In 1974, just 3 years after the creation of Bangladesh, India absolutely shocked the globe by conducting its first nuclear tests. This sparked immediate international concern and firmly placed India on the map as a formidable military power. Yet, as we'll see, a nuclear deterrent couldn't stop domestic turmoil.
Just follow this rapid escalation of internal tension. Throughout this era, you have separatist actions boiling over from Assamese, Sikh, and Kashmiri groups. The Sikh separatist movement in Punjab turned particularly violent when an armed radical group occupied the Golden Temple, which is Sikhism's most sacred shrine. In 1984, the Indian army stormed the temple to neutralize the occupants. The retaliation was immediate, and it was tragic. Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her Sikh bodyguards, sparking region-wide riots. And the clashes didn't stop there. In 1992, right-wing Hindus destroyed the 16th-century Babri Masjid Mosque, reviving severe Hindu-Muslim tensions and triggering deadly attacks, including the very first terrorist bombings in Mumbai.
At the very same time, India was also managing a highly complicated foreign intervention just off its southern coast. Down in Sri Lanka, a civil war was raging between armed Tamil separatists and the Sinhalese government. Because India has a massive Tamil community of its own, they intervened, eventually sending a peacekeeping force to mediate. However, in a tragic bit of irony, things deteriorated so badly that the Indian army ended up engaged in intense battles against the very Tamil separatists they initially supported. It ultimately led to the Sri Lankan government formally demanding the Indian army's departure.
Chapter 6. The Modern Nuclear Era. Terrorism and Unresolved Borders. So the crucial point here is how all these historical threads knot together in the 21st century. Late in the 20th century, both India and Pakistan conducted further nuclear tests, which drew severe international sanctions. Fast forward past the September 11 attacks, and we see the United States and India moving closer to cooperate against regional terrorism. Yet, devastating terror attacks, like the ones in Mumbai in 2008, still occurred. Meanwhile, as a counterbalance, China continues to heavily strengthen its relationship with Pakistan. So the alliances of the Cold War have shifted, for sure, but the regional tension, it absolutely remains.
Which leaves us right here, looking at the conflicting maps of Kashmir today. To this day, India and Pakistan use completely different, officially recognized maps to depict the contested region. Despite decades of diplomacy, wars, and now nuclear armaments, these lines drawn on paper remain unresolved. And understanding this matters deeply because it leaves you with a massive question. How will a century of fiercely defining and contesting these borders ultimately shape the future of South Asia? It is a fascinating question to ponder as this incredibly dynamic region continues to evolve. Thanks for joining me on this explainer.